more than 40 years ago, in 1975, the European Union celebrated the so-called European Architectural Heritage Year. And what was specific is that it was the European Union, which was a Western European Union, which celebrated this, and that it was devoted or focused on architectural heritage. The slogan of the European Heritage Year was "A future for our past." A future for our past. In 2018, this year, we celebrate the European Cultural Heritage Year, which is including former Central and Eastern Europe states as well, and other fields of heritage, not only the architectural heritage, but also the urban heritage, the archaeological heritage, but also the music, theater, and others. And the slogan is not longer "a future for our past," but the new slogan, the guideline is "sharing heritage." What does it mean, sharing heritage? Sharing heritage means, first of all, to share heritage between nations and countries, between different ethnic groups and social groups, between religions and cultures, between generations and age groups, and between the public authorities, the state and communities, the municipalities, and citizens groups and private initiatives. And also to share different layers and different parts of heritage and to discuss it. And so the question arises, why should we share negative heritage? And how should we share the heritage of dictatorship, for example, and the heritage of human rights violations? I think it is because we cannot choose our history and our past, but we have to reflect them. We should not ignore or refuse negative heritage, but we should use it. We have to make it productive to understand and to reflect our past. And learning from history means also learning from the mistakes of our past and to work with unloved history and with unloved heritage to appropriate it and not to eliminate it. So I think that even or especially the so-called negative heritage or dark heritage is a potential, a cultural potential for understanding and of communication, and even more of mutual understanding. It's very important, and it's very important to create something like a culture of conflicts, a culture of discussions, and a culture of controversy, and not to eliminate it or to ignore these problems. And this is also a task, I think, an obligation for the European Cultural Heritage Year. This year, it's not only celebrating the past, it's also discussing how different approaches of cultures and how different points of view can be become in contact, and how it could be discussed and how problems can be solved. In Germany, in Berlin, there is an exhibition was opened at the beginning of the year, which is called The Red God, Joseph Stalin and the Germans. And this exhibition can be seen in the former prison of the Secret Service of the GDR, which is listed as a historic monument and which serves today as a memorial to commemorate the situation in the GDR and the oppression and dictatorship in the socialist part of Germany and of Berlin. So this prison is part of our heritage, and we have to discuss how to deal with it, and we try to include all the persons, the victims, who were in this prison. There are two aspects in the exhibition which are very interesting and which are asked for by many visitors. That one of them is the so-called Stalinstadt, the Stalingrad, the city of Stalin, which was in the eastern part of Germany, and the other one is the Stalin Avenue or the Stalin Boulevard, the Stalin Prospect, which was in Berlin. Here is the Stalinstadt. In this Stalinstadt, has been renamed in 1961 in Eisenhüttenstadt. So only few experts know that Eisenhüttenstadt was the former Stalinstadt. You can see some photographs and postcards as they were sent and used in the 50s. The name has been replaced by Eisenhüttenstadt, but the buildings and the urban structure has been kept and is left, except of some parts which were demolished after the German reunification you can see here. But most of the residential complex are preserved, are not only preserved, they are listed and registered as regional monuments. They have been renovated and restored in a very fine way. And some of the buildings look even better than they looked in the years and decades before, and they have become a very attractive address for people to go there and to live there. The Stalin Avenue in Berlin was created in the late 40s and realized in the 50s, as you can see here, as the first socialist magistrate, the first socialist prospect on German soil, as it was called. And it was also the street of liberation, because the Red Army, they came from the east, and it was the way they passed through the city to the center of Berlin. You can see one of the prospects of the ideas, and here you can see how popular it was to work and to build for children with the buildings of the Stalin Avenue. The Stalin Avenue was also a symbol of the Soviet-German friendship in the 50s, and it was celebrated here, you see, in the background of the Stalin Avenue at Strausberger Platz. In December 1961, in August 1961, the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain were built between East and West, which was an inaccessible Iron Curtain and barrier between East and West. And 4 months later, in December 1961, the Stalin monument of the Stalin Avenue was replaced, and the name of Stalin Avenue was changed in Karl Marx Avenue. But the buildings, the architecture, the urban plan is still there, and it is the same, or similarly the same as it was in the 50s. I think we can say in Berlin is somewhat like a capital, like a metropolis of totalitarian heritage. It is the legacy of the fascist, of the Nazism in Berlin, which is concentrated in the city, and it is the legacy of the socialist, so-called democratic republic. So the city has often served not only as a scene for anti-democratic political tendencies, but it is also an instrument of human rights violation. And when we are looking for the, as it was called, the largest collection of Stalin quotations, you can go to the Soviet Memorial, which is still there, with 45 Stalin quotations, which are engraved in these monuments. And of course, the Berlin Wall is also the rest, and the relics of the Berlin Wall are listed as historic monuments. And when we are discussing about the potential of this kind of heritage, it's not only that for political reasons and for historical reasons it is important, it's also attractive for tourism. Not only because of the commerce of tourism, but also for education, because people who want to go there, maybe they prefer to go to a historic monument instead of going to a museum or to an archive or other means. And sometimes the relics of the socialism and the relics of Nazism are very close together, as you can see here. In the foreground, there are the excavations of the Secret Service of the Nazi time. Then in the middle ground, there is the Berlin Wall, which has been kept. And in the background is the Ministry of Air Traffic, which was also the ministry for the air raids and for the bombs which were steered from this site. And sometimes we have excavations and underground relics, as here you can see the bunker, which is the bunker of the drivers of Adolf Hitler, which were painted out and they have survived, and they are part of our unloved heritage. And even the members of the parliament and the ministries have moved to these buildings, so they are still in use, and the democratic society has to reflect how to deal with this past, which was intended totally different from its contemporary use. Sharing heritage. The Cultural Heritage Year has 5 guiding themes, and 3 of them are interesting for our subject, I think. First of all, there is the idea that the European Cultural Heritage Year should focus on exchange and movement and migration of culture and of people. The second one, that the European city is a very specific feature of European culture and of an urban environment, and that we have somewhat like a living heritage. We have not only an anachronistic past, but it is a vital heritage which can activate people. So the Stalin towns, for example, or other socialist model towns, as they have been created in the 40s and in the 50s in the former Soviet sphere of Eastern Europe, they are a subfield of the European city. They are part of the recent European history and identity. It's very important, I think, that we reflect that not only the years before World War II are part of our history and part of our European identity, but that the post-war achievements and the post-war architecture is also part of a common European cultural heritage. And it is a very important contribution, I think, to modern town planning and to modern urbanism. And it was, today it is still alive, and it is a place where people are living and communicating. What is the role of ICOMOS? ICOMOS is the International Council on Monuments and Sites, and one of the specific duties of ICOMOS is to work as an advisory body for the UNESCO and for the World Heritage inscription and for the World Heritage monitoring and the World Heritage protection. So we are preparing and we are advising the UNESCO and the World Heritage Center on potential World Heritage sites in World Heritage nominations. What kind of heritage should be listed in the World Heritage list? As you can see here, for example, the preparation of the nomination of the warehouse city in Hamburg, or of the housing estates of the 20s in Berlin. And ICOMOS was asked to give us a report on the section which is called Filling the Gaps. The question was, what kind of heritage is not yet represented on the World Heritage list, but which should be included and which should be also nominated? And there are some interesting results. 2 of them I would like to mention or to underline. First of all, that modern heritage, especially the heritage of the 19th and 20th century, is underrepresented on the UNESCO list. And the second one is that transboundary, that multinational nominations are underrepresented on the World Heritage list, and that's very important because transboundary nominations and multinational nominations are based on cooperation and on mutual understanding and of interaction. And a pilot project of this idea or of this research was the project to inscribe the oeuvre of Le Corbusier within 10 countries and member states on 3 continents in the World Heritage list. So it is modern heritage as well as an international multinational nomination. What is the consequence for Central and Eastern Europe? You should know that Central and Eastern Europe, the heritage of 20th century in Central and Eastern Europe is not yet or nearly not represented on the World Heritage List, except of the Centennial Hall in Wrocław in Poland, and except of the Mies van der Rohe house in Brünn. There is no 20th century heritage on the World Heritage List from Central and Eastern Europe. So we said there is a gap and there is an opportunity for these members of the UNESCO Convention to nominate or to prepare nominations and dossiers on this field, especially on post-war heritage, which has common links within the different countries in post-socialist countries. Together with Ecomos Poland, we started an initiative to collect ideas and to bring experts together to communicate this issue for future World Heritage nominations and initiatives. And you see here some of the publications which you can also find in the internet. They are available as a download for everybody. And one of the examples was Buzlučany, which we will visit tomorrow as one example, and others were, for example, the abandoned memorials of the Tito time in Yugoslavia and objects like this. One consequence is the website Socialist Heritage, which you can find, which is unifying socialist realist heritage as well as socialist modern heritage. The heritage of the 40s and of the 50s as well as socialist modern heritage are represented on this World Heritage List, and everybody is invited to make contributions and to send photographs or some information on this field. A very specific initiative was started by Minsk in Belarus to think about a nomination, a serial nomination of capital planning of the large magistrates which have become a main feature and main character of post-war capital planning in Eastern Europe, following the example and the model role of the Soviet Union. So we had some meetings to bring together Minsk with the so-called Independence Avenue, which you can see here, to combine it and to link it with the Marszałkowska district in Warsaw and the Marszałkowska street, which is also the large axis of the rebuilt Warsaw city, and to bring it together with the Kreszczak street and Maidan in Kiev, and to combine it, of course, with Moscow and the Tverskaya Street or Gorky Street and Leningrad Avenue. And to include from Berlin the so-called Stalin Allee, which I already initiated and presented to you, and maybe also from Sofia or from Bulgaria, the Lago could be implemented in this serial nomination. In December 2017 there was a meeting and there were some recommendations to the member states to cooperate on this field and to continue this initiative and to prepare a serial nomination or a dossier with different parties. You can imagine that it is complicated because from a professional point of view, from a point of history of architecture and art and urban planning, that is the one view. The other one is that UNESCO is a political association and a political organization with its member states, and it's not easy to think together the urban heritage of Kiev, Minsk, Berlin, Warsaw and Moscow, but it's difficult to bring them politically together in the terms of a foreign policy of culture. I think in the year of 2018, in the European Cultural Heritage Year, we should not only think about UNESCO initiatives and nominations for the World Heritage List, but we have to think about the possibilities, about the potential on a European level. So I would say goodbye to the World Heritage Initiatives and go over to the so-called European Heritage Label, which was initiated in 2009 by an intergovernmental initiative and which has now become a formal and official part of the cultural policy of the European Union. The idea is to label in distinction to the World Heritage Label, to label sites and places and buildings which play a key role in understanding European history and culture, which are useful for transnational dimensions and transnational cooperation, and which are significant for the history of the site in an international dimension. And one of the first sites which was labeled was not the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall is only part of it, where the relics of the Iron Curtain in a network of the Iron Curtain, which includes 12 or 13 sites which are in different federal states of the Republic of Germany. It was nominated and labeled in 2011. And we have, of course, it's not only the Iron Curtain is not only visible and was not only erected in Germany and divided Germany, but it was Europe which was divided by the Iron Curtain, which went along from Scandinavia to the Balkan region, as you can see here. So the idea is to continue this labeling of 2011 by labeling and by expanding the network of Iron Curtain sites on a European level, including other regions, other states from the Scandinavia to the Balkan, including, for example, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and so on. And we have a conference in June in Berlin on the Iron Curtain and Green Belt networks and opportunities for cooperation in Europe border landscape. In the meetings which were organized by ICOMOS Poland and ICOMOS Germany on a level for Central and Eastern European experts, there was also the idea to bring together socialist urban plannings and model plannings which sometimes are called Stalin City or which are sometimes have different names. And the first approach was to bring together the so-called Stalinstadt from Germany with Nowa Huta in Poland and with Dolna Varosh in Hungary. You know that Stalin cities are only part of the socialist model towns which were created after World War II in Central and Eastern Europe. And for example, in Bulgaria it was Varna, which was the Stalin city for some years, but the more important contribution to this issue is Dimitrovgrad. So I will present only short, give you some examples to show you some buildings here from the Hungary, Stalingrad. You see that the buildings have survived and they are still there, and also the urban layer and the urban structure is very authentically preserved and maintained. In all these cases, the socialist model planning is including an industrial complex, which was the raison d'être, which was the reason why these residential areas and model towns were built. And what is important to understand is that the so-called Stalin towns and the cities of socialist town plannings, they have a double character. There is the traditional architecture of socialist realism, and of national tradition in the sense of the Stalinist classicism, as well as socialist modern features of the 60s and 70s, which are brought together and which are building one complex which cannot be divided. And it can be divided, it is visible that there are different layers, but from an urban point of view, it is one complex which should be seen together and defined together. The second example is Stalinstadt. I already mentioned. Today it is called Eisenhüttenstadt. You see it is a very ideal planning which is following Baroque model cities and utopian planning ideas of the 18th century, which were revitalized for socialist planning for an industrial town in Germany. And you can see that a very important aspect is the green area. The green axis is the green space, which is part of the whole complex. So it's not only for residential purposes, but it is also a very modern town planning of light, sun, fresh air, which has been respected and which was intended. This is the town hall, and you see often also the details are in a very popular way, have been kept in a very traditional way, and they are worth to be restored and to be preserved. The next example, and maybe the most important and the most significant, is Nowa Huta in Poland, which was the largest socialist new town in Eastern Europe after 1945, and which is also discussed to be nominated for the World Heritage List in the UNESCO. Here you can see it's a perfect ideal planning, which looks very symmetrically and monumental and very representative and luxurious, with the free spaces in the courtyards and in the boulevards. The focus of the whole town planning was, or the intention was, that the axis lead to the mining complex, to the steel mill, which was only partially completed and realized. Here you see the administration center of the steel work, which is the central part of the complex. And there are some buildings which have survived, which have also been restored and which are still in use, and which are on a very high degree of authenticity and integrity, as it is required by the UNESCO for World Heritage nominations. And it is also including the buildings and the architecture of the 60s, of modern architecture, which is following or according to the international style and to international standards, and no longer related only to the Stalinist doctrine of socialist in form and proletarian in the content. And of course, next example is Dimitrovgrad in Bulgaria, which should become part of this initiative, which was so to say the most important new town in Bulgaria. You can see it is a similar pattern and similar idea of a symmetric and axial town planning. And also some of the buildings and of the streets and of the public spaces have survived, and even the playgrounds are in a very good, authentic condition there. So we know that Dimitrovgrad is not only a potential partner for an initiative to label socialist towns by the European Heritage Label, but it is also a member of Atrium, of the architecture of the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century in Europe's urban memory. And this Atrium, I know, thank you. And this Atrium is not only a corporation in southeastern Europe and funded by the EU, but specifically it is part of the so-called European cultural roots, which are linked together and which were created, I think, 30 years ago or 35 years ago. And it was the first European cultural program which was multinational and transboundary in the intention to bring different state parties and cultural heritage sites together and to link them. In this case, Atrium is combined with 5 other nations and about 10 cities in other areas in South and Eastern Europe, from Greece, Bulgaria, Croatia, Italy, and so on. You can see here the map, and you think from the point of totalitarian heritage, of course, it would be a strong wish to enlarge this network from Eastern and South Europe, to bring it together with totalitarian heritage sites in North, Central and other parts of Europe, because it is sometimes it's the same source, it's the same reason why this kind of architecture and of urban planning was created, and why we have to discuss how a democratic societies can deal with anti-democratic past and anti-democratic heritage, and we could learn from each other, and it's a very important potential, I think, also from a point of tourism and from a point of economy. So I think that there are 2 levels on a European policy of heritage culture, that is that post-war heritage could be combined and cooperation could be supported by the European Heritage label and by initiatives to labeling these cities, as well as by combining them in the sense and in the framework of the European cultural roots. And as you can see here, it is very easy. It is a childish method to do this kind of network and to bring different partners together by a network or by this scaffolding from a ball of networks, which is here from Dimitrovgrad, sharing heritage. Thank you very much.